She slapped the violation notice against my windshield, like she was stamping out a rat. "Your daughter's been recorded, again," Barbara said flatly. "Unsupervised pool activity, second offense." That was the moment I knew, HOA, Karen recorded my daughter at the pool, and this wasn't going to stay quiet. I didn't flinch. "That camera you installed above the clubhouse gate," I said, "it's not HOA property, and the footage you're saving, it's traceable." Her heels stopped mid-turn. Porch doors creaked open along the cul-de-sac. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. "I wrote the encryption module that used to protect your cloud provider's storage protocol," I added. "You're saving files in public folders you didn't even encrypt." Her face twisted into something brittle. "Mr. Rourke, if you're accusing me of something, I'm confirming it." People like Barbara Densley never expect resistance. Not from a guy like me, quiet, steady, never the one to raise his voice at meetings. They see a widower and assume compliance. What they never see coming is what I do for a living, or why I care so much. My name's Ethan Rourke. I've lived in Sable Glen Estates for a decade. I'm a cybersecurity analyst. I moved here to give my daughter safety. Her name's Ellie. She's 12. That pool is her summer, her freedom, her peace, and someone put a camera on it. You want to know why that matters? My wife, Becca, passed away 4 years ago. Cancer, stage 4 before we ever saw it coming. That lifeguard bench, the one that's still warped from sun and years of neglect. Becca painted it blue. Sat there every afternoon, watching Ellie paddle around in floaties. That bench is where Ellie said her last goodbye. It's where she left her towel this week, the one Barbara used to prove a violation. What they don't say in these notices is where the photo came from. But I know. It wasn't the HOA's mounted system. They can't legally record audio, and there was a mic ping in the data stream. That means Barbara's using her own devices, hidden ones. The printed notice was marked, Ellie Rourke, pool conduct violation, 4:18 p.m. The image showed her adjusting her towel at the pool's edge. Zoomed in, steady frame, no distortion. That wasn't public safety. That was surveillance. And I've seen enough creeps behind keyboards to know the difference. I specialize in breach analysis and behavioral network mapping. I don't just trace code, I identify patterns. One of them is power dressed up as protection. Another is people like Barbara believing they are above scrutiny. What she doesn't know yet is this. The image in that notice contains metadata. The kind you can't erase without third-party software. Time-stamped, device registered, IP linked. Her personal email forwarded this image to the HOA server twice. She didn't mask her tracks. She thought no one would check, but I did. Because it's my kid. Ellie was quiet on the ride home. She saw the letter, even though I tried to fold it up first. "I didn't even get in the pool this time," she mumbled. "I know, Elle," I said, keeping my voice calm. "This one's not about you. It's about what someone else did. The community doesn't know yet. Not really. They just think another violation means another dad who doesn't follow the rules. That's what Barbara's counting on, an audience too tired to question her authority. But they're going to see. All of them. Because this isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. And I'm done letting it slide. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below, because I promise, this story isn't just mine. It's happening on streets like yours, behind HOA, doors like these. And this time, we're not staying silent. The next morning, I showed up early to the HOA monthly meeting. Barbara loved to call them community dialogues. What they really were, rubber stamp sessions for whatever the board wanted passed, sandwiched between free pastries and flimsy folding chairs. She saw me the moment I walked in and narrowed her eyes like I'd tracked mud across her marble floor. I took a seat in the second row, just close enough to be heard. Ellie wasn't with me. She was at her friend's house. I wasn't going to let her be part of this performance. Barbara began with the usual script. Safety concerns have increased, particularly at shared spaces like the clubhouse, pool, park, and gate entrances. The board has reviewed multiple incidents involving unsupervised minors. A dad in the back raised his hand. Was one of those incidents mine? My son got a warning last week. Barbara barely looked up. We can't discuss individual violations in a public forum. But you emailed the violation to 6 other families, he said. We know. It was on next door before I got the letter. There it was, cracks in the wall. I watched the other board members. 3 of them shifted in their seats, pretending to scan paperwork. One of them, though, a woman in a gray blazer with messy curls and tired eyes, looked genuinely uncomfortable. That was Janelle. I didn't know her name yet, but I clocked the way she bit her cheek when Barbara spoke, the way her hands clenched under the table, like she wanted to reach for something, maybe her voice. Barbara continued without missing a beat. We've authorized a minor expansion of our community monitoring program. Under state law, visual-only surveillance is permitted in common areas, visual only. She emphasized it like it came from scripture. I stood up. Can you clarify whether any of the footage used for those violations came from HOA-approved hardware? Silence. She smiled like a judge before sentencing. Mr. Rourke, we appreciate your concern, but this meeting isn't the place for personal grievances. It's a legal question, not a grievance, I said, because unless the HOA board approved private surveillance uploads to your servers, then someone's mixing personal and public footage. And that's not just a policy violation, it's a liability. The room shifted, not loud, just weight moving, breathing changed. People leaned in. Barbara didn't answer right away. She reached for her binder instead and flipped to a tab labeled Conduct. Always prepared until she wasn't. Anyone uncomfortable with current procedures may submit a privacy review form, she said finally. Do you have one right now? I asked. She hesitated. No. A father across the aisle chuckled quietly. Someone else whispered, Typical. Barbara slammed her binder shut. Let's move on. But she couldn't move on. Not really. I watched how Janelle glanced my way, lips pressed in a thin line, eyes scanning the room. Her shoulders weren't straight anymore. She was sinking under something. And it wasn't just Barbara's weight. It was the growing awareness that the board's silence wasn't going unnoticed. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the California sun and caught up with the dad who had spoken earlier. Your son got tagged too? I asked. Yeah. For wandering too close to the gate, he said, shaking his head. He was waiting for me to park. Were there pictures? He nodded, zoomed in, like disturbingly clear. I asked to see the raw footage. They said no. I didn't say much back. I didn't need to. He already knew something was wrong. It was subtle. But something shifted that day. The tone, the way people looked at Barbara, not with respect, but with wariness. She'd spent years building control one rule at a time, but now her rules were starting to raise more questions than they answered. And in a community this tight, once one person questions something, others follow. Sable Glen had always looked perfect. Trimmed hedges, painted shutters, and seasonal banners hung from porches like stage props. But underneath that was fear. Fear of standing out, fear of being the next target. That fear, it was fading. Barbara didn't know it yet, but the curtain was starting to pull back. And I was already reaching for the spotlight. The hallway outside the HOA meeting smelled like furniture polish and nervous sweat. I wasn't the only one who lingered. A few neighbors murmured near the bulletin board, pretending to read announcements. No one wanted to be the first to leave. Not after that. Barbara breezed past us like nothing had happened. Perfect posture, chin high, a folder hugged to her chest like a shield. But Janelle followed a few paces behind, and she looked like she wanted to disappear into the wall. I watched her as she moved, shoulders curled inward, steps clipped short, like she wasn't sure whether to follow Barbara or drift back toward the rest of us. She brushed a curl behind her ear, then did it again. And again. Board members have to pretend they agree, someone whispered behind me. But she didn't look okay. She didn't. Janelle paused near the exit, glanced over her shoulder, then turned and walked toward the water fountain instead. A non-decision, meant to stall. She bent to take a drink, then stayed bent a little too long, her hand gripping the metal rim like it grounded her. I stepped closer but kept my voice low. That was hard to sit through. She didn't answer right away, just straightened slowly and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. You ask good questions, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Didn't feel like they landed. They did, she said, then added quieter, more than you think. We stood in the shallow hush of that hallway, just beyond earshot of the lobby. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. I didn't push her, but I could feel her wavering, like someone already halfway across a tightrope but scared to look down. "You're on the board," I said finally. "You know the surveillance policies, or lack of them." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She turned her head toward the windows at the far end of the corridor. Her hands, still clasped around her phone, twitched, fingers tracing over the edge of the case. "They didn't tell me we were using private footage," she said at last. I didn't blink. "But you've seen it." A nod, barely perceptible. "Do you know how it's being stored?" "No." Her voice cracked. "Barbara she said it was for safety, that parents wouldn't mind as long as it kept kids from vandalizing the pool again." "Is that what Ellie was doing?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "No." The air tightened between us. "She was drying off," I said. "That's all." And Barbara kept a close-up photo, then forwarded it. "And your name's on the file distribution log." Janelle's eyes opened, wide, sharp. Her breath caught like she hadn't expected the proof to go both ways. "I didn't know that," she said, her voice breaking into something smaller. "I never opened the file. We all get these batch reports. I thought it was a formality. It isn't." Her fingers trembled now. She looked down at them like they weren't hers. "I didn't want to get involved," she whispered. "I've only been on the board 6 months. I thought keeping my head down was the safest option. Not for the kids." That landed hard. She blinked fast and looked away, jaw clenched. I didn't need to say more. The silence did the work for me. After a few seconds, she straightened her spine. But it was a forced movement, like it hurt. "I'm supposed to vote on a new proposal next week," she said. "Something about expanding community monitoring. Adding license plate cameras near the park. Are you going?" "To?" She didn't answer. Not yet, but she was close. You could see it in the way her breath shortened, the way she kept wiping her hands on her skirt, as though trying to scrub something off. Guilt, maybe, or complicity. "I have a daughter too," she said suddenly. 6. She plays by that same pool every Saturday. I let that hang between us. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Be careful, Ethan. Barbara doesn't like being challenged." "Neither do I said, "especially when it comes to my kid." She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away fast either, and that was the first time I knew. I wasn't alone in this, not completely. The letter came in a cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no address, just folded and tucked into our HOA-approved mailbox like a dirty secret. I pulled it out mid-step, thinking it was another notice about landscaping or garbage bins left out too long. But as soon as I saw Ellie's name printed in bold at the top, my stomach clenched. It wasn't just another violation. It was a formal warning, labeled second citation, child endangerment, parental neglect, consideration pending. That wasn't just HOA language. That was language designed to scare. The front porch creaked under my weight as I sat down and read the rest. Barbara, or someone under her direction, had filed a report with the HOA's compliance board alleging I'd repeatedly allowed unsupervised pool behavior in direct contradiction to posted rules. The notice warned that, pending board review, my family's access to all communal areas, including the pool, park, and clubhouse, would be suspended for 90 days. My daughter was being banned from her own neighborhood. I flipped the letter over. Hand signed, Barbara Densley, Vice President, Sable Glen Estates HOA. She wanted me angry, that much was clear. She wanted me to react without thinking, to lash out and make her look like the reasonable one. But anger wasn't what hit me first. It was something colder. I took the letter inside and laid it flat on my dining table, the same table where Ellie and I built puzzles, the one Becca had refinished after finding it at a garage sale 5 years ago. I sat down and stared at that letter for a long time. This wasn't just overreach. It was escalation. Barbara was trying to isolate us, shame us. She was betting that once the neighbors saw we'd been banned from the pool, they'd stop asking questions about surveillance and start whispering about what I must have done to deserve it. I knew her kind of control. In cybersecurity, we called it denial through layering. So many minor blocks stacked together that the target suffocates under them, without any single action seeming outrageous. I wasn't going to suffocate. A knock on the door pulled me out of the spiral. It was Miguel from down the street. He ran the HVAC company and had twin boys who biked past our yard every afternoon. He didn't say anything at first, just held up the same cream envelope I'd received. "You too?" I asked. He nodded and stepped inside. His letter wasn't about his kids. It was about his security camera, installed on his own garage. Apparently, the HOA now claimed it faced a common area and constituted an unauthorized surveillance device. They said it's a liability, he muttered. But it's my property. My driveway. They're moving fast, I said. Feels like anyone who's questioned them is getting something now. I showed him my letter. He let out a low whistle. She's coming for your kid now? She already did, I said. This is just the follow-up. We sat there for a while, going over what we knew. Between us, we could count at least 4 families who had received citations in the last 2 weeks. All of them had kids. All of them had spoken up, even mildly, about the way the HOA handled security. Miguel leaned back in the chair. You think she's got something to hide? I think she's storing private images of minors and folders on a cloud server that doesn't belong to the HOA. His eyebrows shot up. You sure? I traced the metadata. It's sloppy. And it leads back to her. He let out a slow breath. You going to do something with it? I will. Not yet. But soon he nodded, but his face was tight. Just be careful, man. People like her? They don't stop when they're challenged. They double down. I knew that. That's why I hadn't gone public yet. Barbara was building a wall of policies and citations. But walls can crumble. All it takes is the right pressure at the right time. I looked out the window as Miguel left. Ellie was in the driveway with sidewalk chalk, drawing flowers in neon pink. The same driveway that had just been flagged as unsecured property. They could try to isolate us. But I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't staying quiet. I closed the door to my home office and locked it behind me. The desk was cluttered. Ellie's forgotten school notebook half open beside my mouse pad. An empty coffee mug tilted against the monitor stand. But I didn't touch any of it. I sat down, powered up both screens, and opened the data folder I'd quietly mirrored after Barbara's last violation notice. It was just metadata. But metadata's never just metadata. The original violation photo of Ellie had been sent to me through the HOA server, a generic address ending in admin at sableglenhoa.org. But the image itself had come from a Google Drive link, shortened with a tracking token that shouldn't have been there. I traced the token back. The uploader's ID wasn't the HOA's. It belonged to a Gmail address ending in BDENSLEY78. Barbara's personal cloud, not the board's, not a shared folder. A private, unsanctioned cloud. I clicked deeper. Each image stored there, about 48 in total, was organized by last name. Rourke, Benavides Sharma, Lynn Harper, each. Folder contained a few still shots. All kids, all taken near the pool, the clubhouse, or the bike racks by the tennis court. All without permission. Some were clearly just kids playing. Others were taken at strange moments, like a boy leaning forward to tie his shoe, or 2 girls adjusting their hair near the splash fountain. Nothing overtly criminal, but the angle, the timing, the intent behind saving them, it was enough to make my skin crawl. Each file contained EXIF data. I right-clicked on one and opened its info. GPS coordinates, capture time, device model. The camera wasn't the HOA's mounted system. It was a Nest Cam. Mobile, privately owned, and it had been connected to a live account with 2 active share tokens, one of which had granted public viewing access. Public. That meant that for however long those tokens were live, anyone with the link could have seen those images, downloaded them, shared them. My hands hovered above the keyboard. I didn't want to believe it. But this wasn't an accident. This wasn't about security. This was about control, and maybe something worse. I took screenshots of the token history, folder names, and share permissions. Not the images themselves. I wouldn't touch those, not even for evidence. I knew where the line was, Barbara didn't. I encrypted the screenshots and exported them to a secure external drive, just in case. Then I ran a trace on the public token history using a scraper I'd built for a client's security audit last year. It showed me the last known pings. The links had been accessed by 3 different IP addresses in the last 30 days, one in Sable Glen, one in downtown Irvine, and one in Arkansas. I leaned back. She wasn't just saving these for HOA purposes. She was sending them out. My blood went cold. There was no universe in which this was community monitoring. It was something else entirely, and now I had enough to prove it. Still, I needed to be smart. If I went to the board now, Barbara would bury it. If I posted it on a local forum without backing, she'd spin it. I needed a witness, a trail, a way to lock the story before she could scrub it. But more than anything, I needed her to keep thinking she was safe, right until the moment she wasn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Miguel. "You free tonight?" Group of us thinking about a parent meetup. Quiet. Clubhouse parking lot. 9 p.m. I stared at the screen. Something was shifting, not just in the files, but in the neighborhood. Barbara had moved in shadows for years, but shadows only work when no one shines a light. And now, I had the fuse lit. I closed the browser, wiped the local cache, and disconnected the drive. I wasn't scared, not anymore. I sat on the living room floor that night, surrounded by things that didn't matter until they suddenly did. Ellie's towel was still draped over the arm of the couch, half dry from yesterday's swim. One of her flip-flops had slipped under the coffee table. A juice box sat unfinished beside her sketch pad, marker caps scattered like she'd peeled them off mid-thought. She was in bed, and I couldn't sleep. Not after what I'd seen in Barbara's folders, not after those IP traces, and not after realizing that some of those photo links had been publicly accessible long enough for God knows who to view them. The image of Ellie, frozen mid-step, pulling her towel around her shoulders, burned in my mind like static. There was nothing revealing about it, nothing provocative, just a 12-year-old kid leaving the pool. But that wasn't the point. The point was that it was saved, that it was sorted under her name, that someone, multiple someones, had looked at it. And that my daughter, who still slept with a nightlight and couldn't go to bed without checking if I locked the back door, had no idea how exposed she really was. I'd told her the notice was a mistake, a misunderstanding, that we were sorting it out. But that lie was starting to buckle under the weight of what I now knew. I leaned my head back against the base of the couch and stared at the ceiling fan. It spun lazily, humming like a dull warning. A part of me wanted to walk straight to Barbara's house, bang on the door, demand she open her cloud account in front of the entire board, drag the truth out into the light with nothing but rage and proof. But I couldn't, because the only thing worse than a predator is one that knows you're watching and has time to cover her tracks. I had one shot at this. One. She still thought I was bluffing. She still thought she controlled the narrative. As long as she believed that, she wouldn't panic, wouldn't delete, wouldn't scramble the truth into something legally gray. And I needed that window to hold. A quiet knock came at the front door. I stood slowly and opened it. Janelle. No clipboard, no smile, just a hoodie, jeans, and a face that looked like it hadn't slept since the last board meeting. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She moved into the room like someone walking on thin ice. Didn't sit, just stood there, eyes flicking from the couch to the towel to the walls full of framed photos. "I heard Barbara's filing for your suspension from the clubhouse entirely," she said. "She already did." Janelle pressed her lips together, nodding. "She's escalating faster than I thought. She's scared, or she's arrogant. Both." I watched her closely. She still hadn't sat down. She was chewing the inside of her cheek again, one hand clenching the sleeve of her hoodie. The same visible conflict as before, but deeper now, brittle, about to snap. "I looked through the last 3 board reports," she said. "None of the images used in violations were marked as coming from personal devices. That field was always blank, because she doesn't want a paper trail." "I know," she whispered, "and I've been signing off." On all of it, I stepped closer. "You didn't take the pictures?" "No," she said, finally sinking onto the edge of the couch. "But I let her show them." I looked away. We sat there for a long moment. "Can you help me?" I asked. She looked up. "Not yet," I added, "but soon. I need her to keep thinking she's untouchable. I need her to talk freely. I need her to expose herself in front of the people who've never questioned her." Janelle nodded slowly. "I think I know how to make that happen," she said. Something shifted in her eyes. Not fear, not guilt. Resolve. Ellie's bedroom door creaked open down the hall. Janelle stood. "Keep her safe." "I will." I watched her leave. Then I walked back into the office. And I opened the folder I'd been building. One screenshot, one audio clip, one timestamp at a time. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about Ellie, and I wasn't asking permission. Janelle texted at 11:13 p.m. You still awake? I was already in the office, eyes red from the glow of the dual screens. I sent back a single word. Yes. 3 minutes later, she knocked. No small talk this time. She wore the same hoodie, pulled tight around her face, but her movements were sharper now. No more hesitation, no more tiptoeing around the line. I can't send this, she said, stepping inside and pressing a flash drive into my palm. I can't even email it. If she checks the board server logs... You're clean, I said, guiding her to the couch. This stays local. She nodded, clutching her hands like they might betray her. I plugged the drive into my offline laptop. The folder had no label, just 3 .wav files and a single .txt note. boardroom_archive_3_22.wav. Executive prep _5_6.wav. And private_clip_audio.wav. Where did these come from? I asked. Barbara records all our executive sessions for accuracy, Janelle said. She plays them back and transcribes her version for the minutes. I noticed she'd been skipping certain quotes, so I started copying them to a private backup. I raised my eyebrows. She met my stare. I didn't want to believe it at first either. I opened the first file, boardroom chatter, folding chairs creaking. The air was thick with passive-aggressive pleasantries and veiled power plays. Then Barbara's voice cut through, too clear to be anything but intentional. Let's be honest, if we don't control the pool, we lose the only behavioral leverage we have over these families. Murmurs followed. Another board member tried to object. Barbara again. Then we'll document them. Quietly. A picture here, a note there. We don't need to confront them. We just need enough to justify action. Janelle sat very still beside me. I moved to the second file. This one was quieter, more focused. Barbara, alone or nearly alone, pacing. Lynn's kid was shirtless again. Rourke's daughter, too. Bold for her age. These photos matter. Parents don't pay attention until their image is at stake. I don't keep them for show. I keep them for persuasion. That word. Persuasion. I clenched my jaw. They're not violations, I said. They're threats. I know, Janelle whispered. That's why I saved the third one. I double-clicked private_clip_audio.wav. No meeting sounds, just a door closing. Then Barbara's voice, lower than before. By the time they realize what I've collected, it'll be too late. They'll never admit they were out of line. They'll back down to avoid embarrassment. That's how you shape compliance. She laughed at the end, not a joke, a confirmation. I closed the laptop lid. Are these the only copies? I asked. No, I have a duplicate hidden at work, but I don't want them near my daughter's iPad, or her school backpack. Barbara's not dumb. No, I agreed. She's calculated. But this changes everything. Janelle sat back, arms crossed. You still planning to go public? When the timing's right. You need more than this. I looked at her. This is enough for the police. It's not enough for the court of public opinion, she said. Trust me. I've watched how she spins things. You need faces, names, a pattern. You need outrage, not just evidence. She was right. This Friday, she added, Barbara's pushing through a new monitoring proposal. Cameras at the playground, license plate scanners at both entrances. Where's the vote? Clubhouse. Full board meeting, open attendance. I leaned forward. Will you speak? Janelle hesitated, but only for a moment. If you promise to release everything after the meeting, she said, then yes. I'll say what I know. Publicly, I nodded. I give you my word. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Then she stood. You're not the only one protecting a daughter, Ethan. I walked her to the door. As she left, I tucked the flash drive into a fireproof envelope and slid it behind a loose panel under the printer. We had our spark. Now I needed kindling. And Barbara? She had no idea the fire was already lit. I didn't sleep after Janelle left. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through parent forums and local Facebook groups. The same neighborhoods Barbara thought were blind were already restless. They just didn't know where to point their anger yet. That was about to change. The HOA's public meeting was in 3 days. If she stuck to her pattern, Barbara would spend the first 10 minutes rattling off fake safety statistics and pushing her expanded monitoring proposal through a pre-scripted vote. She didn't expect resistance. That was her weakness. I needed 3 things before then: a way to present the evidence without compromising the kids, a trigger to get parents in that room, and a backup plan if the board tried to shut it down. I opened a private browser tab and started drafting. I created a new Google Drive folder and titled it Sable Glenn _surveillance abuse _evidence pack. But I left it empty for now. No images, no audio, just a teaser document. One screenshot of Barbara's email forwarding metadata, another showing the folder structure of her cloud drive. Enough to ignite concern, not enough to be dismissed. The headline read, "This is what your HOA isn't telling you." I embedded a QR code at the bottom. I made it clean. Professional, anonymous. Then I exported it to a printable flyer. At 3:47 a.m., I drove to an all-night print shop outside the neighborhood. I ordered 50 full-color flyers and paid in cash. While I waited, I drafted a second post, short to the point, for the private Sable Glen parents group on Facebook. There's a board meeting Friday. Your voice matters more than you know. If you've ever received a strange violation or wondered who's watching your child at the pool, come. And bring a friend. I scheduled it to post at 6:02 a.m., time to hit just as people were waking up. Back at home, I stepped out just before sunrise and slipped a flyer under the windshield of every SUV and minivan I knew had car seats in the back. Just the ones I trusted to look twice before deleting something uncomfortable. By 9 a.m., the group post had 48 likes, 19 comments, and 3 parents had reshared it to their neighborhood circles. By noon, the HOA office sent out a formal email reminding residents that recordings taken on community property are for security only and are protected under HOA data policy. That was faster than I expected. Barbara had seen the ripple, but she didn't know where the drop came from. Miguel texted me around 2 o'clock. "She just sent a warning to the board. Says someone's leaking internal documents. You good?" I replied with a photo of the QR code taped to the bulletin board at the park. Better than good. That afternoon, I met with the reporter. Her name was Renna, mid-30s, sharp eyes. She didn't blink once during the 10 minutes I laid it all out. The audio files, the folder structure, the images I refused to show, the timestamp trails, and Janelle's willingness to speak. "You want a full piece or a fast headline?" she asked. "Fast. I want the story out the moment she tries to push the vote." Renna nodded. "Then I'll need a quote. Something personal. From you, no name." "No name," she agreed. "But something they'll feel." I thought of Ellie, of the towel draped over the porch rail, of the word persuasion spoken in Barbara's voice. I gave her the quote. She wrote it down. By the time the sun dipped behind the hedges, the neighborhood was awake in a way I hadn't seen in years. Parents walked in pairs. Text chains buzzed across driveways. People lingered longer outside their homes, glancing toward the clubhouse. The silence was gone. Now came the storm, and I was the one who stirred the wind. The day before the meeting, I parked 3 blocks away from the clubhouse and walked in on foot, hoodie up, sunglasses on, just another dad getting his steps in. The cameras wouldn't catch me. Barbara only watched the ones near the pool and the front gate. She liked control, not effort. I wasn't here to break rules, just to test the layout. The community room had tall windows, acoustic ceiling panels, and a projector screen that looked like it hadn't been used in months. Rows of chairs sat neatly stacked along the back wall. I walked the perimeter, counting seconds, noting the echo. It would be full tomorrow, packed if the comments I'd seen online were any sign. The parents weren't just curious anymore, they were angry, and Barbara couldn't mute them all. By that evening, the evidence folder I'd created had over 100 ping requests on the QR code. Half the hits came from local IPS. A few came from city government domains. One came from a local school system. I kept a backup server ready, just in case she tried to have the link pulled. At home, I printed physical handouts. No images, no children's names, just raw facts, metadata trails, timestamps, proof of off-site storage. The kind of material a parent could read and understand in 30 seconds. The kind of thing you can't unsee once it's in your hand. Miguel offered to help distribute. So did Sarah Harper, whose daughter had received a violation for bathing suit color being a distraction. I gave them gloves, envelopes, and a list of mailboxes. We didn't knock. We didn't need to. Barbara had built this pressure chamber herself. We were just cracking the valve. At 10:18 p.m., I received an email from a city official's private address. Not formal, not threatening, just a note that said, "We've seen the files. If the allegations are brought forward, we're prepared to observe." Observe. That was all I needed. I finalized my statement, not a speech, nothing theatrical. Just 3 sentences, typed in a clean font, printed in triplicate, and folded into my coat pocket. I also burned a new drive. This one was labeled "For Distribution, Confirmed." It had a time-sequenced log of every cloud folder upload, every forwarded email Barbara had ever sent with those private images attached. Every trace she thought had disappeared. It didn't have to go public yet, not unless she pushed. Ellie came into the room just before midnight. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway in her oversized t-shirt and socks, holding a glass of water. "You're not going to stop, are you?" she asked. I looked up from the printer. "No," I said, "I'm not. Even if it makes people mad, especially then." She walked over, put the glass beside me, and leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm not scared," she said. "Not anymore." Neither was I. At dawn, the neighborhood felt different. The birds were still there. The sprinklers still ticked to life. But there was something beneath the routine, a tension, a current, a sense that tomorrow wouldn't be like today. I checked the inbox one last time before heading out. Janelle had sent a message. "I'll bring the statement and stand with you." No matter how it ends, I replied with a simple, "Then it ends the right way." My final task was to upload a delay-posted article to a dead man's switch, a function that would release everything to the press if I didn't log in again within 72 hours. It was insurance, not because I feared Barbara, but because I didn't trust silence. As I sealed the manila folder with the drive inside, I placed it under the passenger seat of my car, beside an envelope labeled with the name of the reporter, Rena. If the board tried to cut the meeting short, if they tried to discredit Janelle, if Barbara even tried to delete a file while we stood there, this would all go live. The only thing left now was to walk in, sit down, and wait for her to speak. Because when she did, I'd have the room and the truth. I arrived at the clubhouse 20 minutes early and still had to park 2 blocks away. The lot was full, SUVs crammed into spaces, people walking up the sidewalk with folded lawn chairs, strollers, coffee cups, clipboards. I recognized more than a few faces. Most of them gave me small nods. A few just looked at me and kept walking, eyes sharp. The room was louder than usual. Normally, HOA meetings were half-empty affairs, retired couples, and a handful of over-involved residents. Tonight, it was standing room only. Parents clustered near the windows, whispers riding above the shuffle of feet. Someone had brought a speaker on wheels in case the audio system failed. Someone else had posted a printed QR code on the door, taped up with neon paper. It wasn't mine. People were making their own copies now. I walked inside and took my seat in the second row, same one I'd used the last time I challenged Barbara. But this time, Janelle sat beside me. No hoodie, no hesitation. She wore a navy blazer, simple earrings, hair pulled back tight. Her hands were folded in her lap, but I could see the rhythm in her thumb, pulsing, steady. "You ready?" I asked. She nodded once. She doesn't know I'm speaking. That's the point. Barbara walked in 5 minutes before the meeting began, flanked by 2 board members I hadn't seen outside of holiday events. She wore a bright coral jacket, gold watch, and the smile of someone who thought this was still hers to control. She approached the podium with slow confidence, adjusting the mic like she was settling in for a performance. "Good evening," she said, voice even. "We're pleased to see such active community interest in tonight's session. Due to the large turnout, we'll be limiting open comments to 1 per household after board business has concluded." A few quiet boos rippled from the back. Someone laughed dryly. Barbara didn't flinch. "As many of you know," she continued, "we're here tonight to vote on a long-overdue upgrade to our community safety infrastructure, including the addition of license plate scanners at both entrances and mounted visual surveillance near the playground and walking paths." She turned slightly as if addressing a friendly crowd. "These measures are proactive, not reactive. They ensure the long-term peace and security of our neighborhood, especially for families." The word families hit harder than she meant it to. I saw 3 parents near the rear door whisper something to each other. One of them folded their arms tight across their chest. Another pulled out their phone and started recording. Barbara glanced around but pushed forward. Unless there's a formal objection from the board, we'll move to vote. That was the cue. Janelle stood up. The room shifted, like a ripple catching on stone. Barbara froze mid-sentence. Board member Myers, do you have a procedural clarification? No, Janelle said, calm and steady. I have a statement. Barbara opened her mouth, likely to protest, but Janelle kept speaking, loud enough for the room, not just the board. I've been a part of this HOA board for 6 months. During that time, I've been shown images, sent emails, and included in internal reports that do not meet the standards we claim to uphold. She pulled a sheet of paper from her folder and unfolded it carefully. Photos of minors saved without parental consent, emails forwarded to non-HOA servers, metadata trails that link sensitive content to private cloud accounts. This wasn't about safety. It was about control, and it was never authorized. The room exploded. Gasps, voices. Someone shouted, "She said what?" Phones rose like hands in protest. Barbara stepped back from the podium, color draining from her face. I didn't authorize those images, Barbara said, voice suddenly brittle. Those were for internal documentation. You uploaded them from your personal Gmail, Janelle said. I've seen the access logs. Sit down, Barbara hissed. No, Janelle replied. Not anymore. The room surged forward, voices rising, people stepping out of rows. One man in a denim jacket yelled, "That's my kid's name on those files." Another woman shouted, "We trusted you." Barbara looked trapped, and in that silence, I stood. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just held up the flash drive in my hand. This, I said, is every action you've taken for the past year. Verified, time-stamped, and legally archived. Barbara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I turned to face the room, and for the first time, they weren't looking at her. They were looking at me. Barbara tried to regain control. Let's move to recess the session pending legal review, she stammered, her voice rising above the noise, but not silencing it. Board members, please accompany me to the back for a... No, said the man in the denim jacket, stepping into the aisle. We're not going anywhere. Others followed, voices swelled. Someone opened the side doors to let in more air, or maybe just to keep the crowd from overheating. One mom clutched a printed flyer in her hand, shaking it like a flag. Another was already live streaming from her phone. Barbara backed away from the podium. Her hands trembled slightly, but her smile returned, a rehearsed political thing. I understand this may be upsetting, she said, but none of this is confirmed. These are baseless allegations from a resident with a personal vendetta. I stepped forward. You forwarded surveillance images of children from your personal Gmail. You stored them in a public cloud folder with zero encryption and reused access tokens. That's not a vendetta. It's forensic fact. Gasps broke across the rows. Janelle stood again. I've reviewed the same evidence. The board never approved this kind of monitoring. No parental consent was gathered, and Barbara never disclosed where the footage was being saved. She showed pictures of my daughter, a voice shouted from the back. She emailed them to the whole board like she was proud. My son's in one of those folders, someone else said. You want to see my vendetta? Barbara held her ground for another heartbeat, then looked toward her allies on the board, 2 men and a woman who had mostly kept their heads down through the entire meeting. Back me up, she whispered toward them, barely audible. The woman stood, not for her, for the crowd. I move to suspend Vice President Densley from her duties pending a formal ethics review, she said, her voice cracking halfway through but finishing strong. Effective immediately. The room froze, and then applause broke out in waves. Barbara's jaw dropped open. You don't have the authority, she snapped. We do when the board votes, said the second member, standing now. And from where I'm sitting, it's 3 against 1. Barbara's face went pale. Miguel stepped up beside me and handed me a folded printout. It was a summary of the QR code scan data. Over 130 unique devices had accessed the evidence folder in the last 48 hours. The community wasn't just aware now, they were mobilized. You're done, I said, meeting Barbara's eyes. You could have admitted it. Said it was a mistake. But you doubled down. I've lived here 15 years, she spat. I built this board. I built this community. No, I said. You built a machine. We just turned it off. 2 security officers hired for crowd control stepped forward. Not police, not armed, but enough of a presence that Barbara knew she couldn't storm her way out of this. She turned to them and muttered something under her breath. They didn't move. Instead, one of them said, "Ma'am, we've been asked to escort you outside while the board finishes the vote." "You can't be serious," she snapped. The second officer gestured toward the door. "Please." Barbara's steps were stiff, mechanical. Her eyes darted across the room like she was looking for a lifeline, but no one offered her one. Not this time. As she passed me, she paused for half a second. "This isn't over," she whispered. I didn't flinch. "Yes, it is." The doors opened, she stepped outside. The room breathed. Janelle exhaled deeply and leaned into the podium. "I'd like to propose an immediate review of all HOA surveillance policies, with a temporary suspension of monitoring until community standards are reestablished." Applause again. Not loud this time, just steady, purposeful. A rising wave that filled the space Barbara once controlled with something better. Something honest. Outside, I saw parents already forming small circles, talking fast, phones out, hands gesturing. Flyers were being passed around again. Some were already drafting a petition for a full board recall. But me, I just stood there. Ellie's image still lived in my mind, but now it had power behind it, protection. A wall built not from fear, but from truth. The neighborhood had seen too much to unsee it now. And the bench by the pool, it wouldn't be watched anymore. It would be guarded. The next morning, I walked Ellie to the pool. The sky was wide and quiet, the kind of morning that felt like an apology for everything that came before it. Sprinklers ticked gently across trimmed lawns. A few neighbors waved, not the cautious nods of last week, but real ones, confident, acknowledging. Ellie held my hand tighter than usual. She hadn't said much about what happened, but kids always know more than they say. She hadn't asked why people were talking in clusters near the mailboxes or why someone had taped a flyer to the side of the clubhouse that read, "Your child deserves privacy." Not a file name. We reached the pool gate. The sign had changed. Where there used to be a printed list of surveillance warnings, now there was a handwritten sheet taped over the plastic holder. Surveillance suspended pending community vote. All prior violations nullified. Ellie looked up at me. "So I can go in?" I nodded. "You can." She slipped through the gate, towel slung over one shoulder, goggles hanging around her neck. She stopped at the edge of the pool, not to jump in, but to sit on the lifeguard bench. That same old sun-bleached bench Becca had painted. The one Barbara had tried to turn into her watchtower. But not anymore. Someone had scrubbed the wood clean. Someone had repainted the legs. And someone, maybe Janelle, maybe one of the dads, had attached a small bronze plaque to the side. It read, "Guarded by community, watched with consent." It hit me harder than I expected. I sat on one of the lounge chairs and watched Ellie dangle her feet in the water. She wasn't laughing yet, not smiling either, but she was here. She had returned. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Janelle stood by the gate, coffee in hand, sunglasses on. She looked tired, but lighter somehow, like someone who'd stopped carrying someone else's burden. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." She gestured toward the plaque. "They voted this morning to replace all the surveillance signage with privacy-first language. We're rewriting the bylaws from scratch. You staying on the board?" "For now. Someone has to make sure it doesn't crawl back." Miguel walked up behind her. "Parents are meeting tonight at the park. No cameras, no rules, just burgers and cleanup duty. You in?" I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." Barbara hadn't shown her face since the meeting. Word was she'd retained an attorney, but the board wasn't budging. The city had opened a preliminary inquiry into unauthorized surveillance and child privacy violations. Whether it went anywhere or not, her time in control was over. The damage she did would take longer to undo. But we weren't waiting for permission anymore. We were fixing it ourselves. Ellie finally slid into the water, slow and calm. She didn't flinch, didn't check over her shoulder. That was all I needed. Back home, I pulled up the message Rena had sent that morning. The article had gone live. Orange County HOA VP resigns after secret files of children exposed, whistleblowers, parents demand reform. The link had already been shared to 3 local news stations, 1 national forum, and half a dozen parenting pages. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a warning, and maybe, for someone else out there fighting a smaller version of the same monster, it was a strategy. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.